Okay, today we're going to do something that I've been thinking about, and an idea. I believe the Spirit led me here because of what's going on today and what I've been through as a teenager and whatever. It's called political campaign advertisements. It's fear mongering. Fear mongering or scaremongering is the spreading of frightening and exaggerated rumors of an impending danger, or the habit or tactic of purposely and needlessly arousing public fear about an issue. Political campaign advertisements. Probably best well known examples in American politics. Pre 9/11 is the Daisy television commercial, a famous television advertisement used during Lyndon Baines Johnson's 1964 presidential run. It began with a little girl standing in a meadow with chirping birds picking up petals of a daisy while counting each petal slowly. When she reaches 9, an ominous sounding male voice is then heard counting down a missile launch, and the girl's eyes turn toward something she sees in the sky. The camera zooms in until the pupil fills the screen, blacking it out. When the countdown reaches 0, the blackness is replaced by a flash and mushroom cloud nuclear explosion.
These are the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Isn't that a horrible dang thing to have to go through when you're a kid? To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark, must either love each other or must die, or we must die. Another nice voiceover then says, vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home. Sounds familiar. Advertisers have also entered the arena with the discovery that fear sells. Ad campaign based on fear, sometimes referred to shock advertising, have become increasingly popular in recent years. Fear is a strong emotion, and it can be manipulated to steer people into making emotional rather than reasonable choices. From car commercials that imply that having fewer airbags will cause your family to have family harm, to disinfect commercials that show bacteria lurking on every surface. Fear-based advertising works. While using fear in the ads has generated some negative reactions by the public, where the evidence to show that shock advertising is highly effective, persuasive technique, and over the several years, advertisers have continued to increase their usage of fear ads in what has been called a never-ending arms race in the advertising business. Author Ken Ring was accused of scaremongering by New Zealand politicians Nick Smith, Auckland seller of almanacs, made predictions about earthquakes and weather patterns based on lunar cycles, and some of his predictions were taken seriously by some members of the public in connection with the 2011 earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. Yeah, I guess that's all that one now. Okay, this is what in the world. A personal take on what's happening in the world today. Fear-mongering. The battle between terrorists and governments. Fear-mongering. There is a huge battle being waged today for the hearts and minds of ordinary people. On one side, terrorists, while on the other side are governments. Both sides are fear-mongering in order to win over public opinion and advance their cause. Terrorists exaggerate their abilities to inflict damage. They use violence and intimidation in the pursuit of their political aims. By exaggerating their destructive abilities, they increase the fear and intimidation. The more damage people believe that terrorist groups has inflicted, the more funding they will receive from extremists, and the more people they are able to attract to their cause. Governments also exaggerate how much damage terrorists have inflicted or are capable of inflicting. Sources within the FBI and CIA, as well as news sources such as Time and the Washington Post, have all said the U.S. government officials were trying to create an atmosphere of fear in which the American people would give them more power. Tom Ridge, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, has admitted that he was pressured to raise terror alerts to help Bush win re-election. The threat from Islamic terrorists, while real, has been greatly exaggerated. Zbigniew Brzezinski, a former UN National Security Advisor, has described the war on terror as a mythical, historical narrative. The U.S. government and many other governments justify many of their policies on the need for greater security by hyping the terror menace. Government wants you to be scared about or scared out of your pants by the risk of terrorism. but is the fear legitimate? What are the real facts about terrorism? And this is the Herald Sun. AIDS for all terrorists attacks, faces of fear, and the actual figures are astonishing. Here is a small sample. Daniel Benjamin, the coordinator for counterterrorism at the U.S. Department of State from 2009 to 2012, has studied these figures. The total number of deaths from terrorism in recent years has been extremely small in the West, and the threat itself has been considerably reduced. Given all the headlines of the people don't have that perception, but if you look at the statistics, that's in this is the case. According to the economists, despite the horror, there have actually been very few terror attacks in Europe. The recent attacks in Canada and Australia were caused by organized terrorists. Other newspapers have noted that the non-Muslims have carried out the vast majority of terrorist attacks on both U.S. soil and in Europe, while the overwhelming majority of victims of Muslim terror attacks are Muslims. The war on terror has been counterproductive and only increased the terrorism problem. Government have admitted that many terror attacks around the world have actually been carried out by government forces and blamed on their enemies as a way to justify war or other objectives. While terrorists and governments trying to scare the pants off you, the truth is that if we refuse to be terrorized, we win and terrorism lose. Are greater security measures warranted? And if they are they effective? What about the mass surveillance that has been proposed in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo attack? There's the security cameras right there. Bill Binnery, the former head of the NSA's Global Intelligence Gathering Receptions, notes that the mass surveillance interferes with the government's ability to catch bad guys, and that the government failed to stop the Boston bombing because it was overwhelmed with data from mass surveillance on Americans. Binary explains that this also applies to the Paris attack as well. A good deal of the failure, in my opinion, due to the bulk data, so I am calling all these attacks a result of data bulk failure. Too much data and too many people for the tens of thousands analysis to follow. Simply that, as simple as that. Especially when they make match polls like Google and get dumps of data selected from close to 4 billion people. This is the same problem NSA had before 9/11. They had data that could have prevented 9/11, but did not know they had it in their databases. Back then, when the bulk collection was not going on. Now the problem is orders of magnitude greater. Result is harder to succeed. Expect more of the same from the deluded government that thinks more data improves possibilities of success. All of these bulk data collections and storage just gives law enforcement a great deal of capability to retroactively analyze anyone they want, but of course that the data cannot be used in court since it was not required with the warrant. NBC News reports in a similar vein on the problem created by mass surveillance. A member of the White House review panel on NSA surveillance said he was absolutely surprised when he discovered the agency's lack of evidence that the bulk collection of telephone call records that thwarted and terrorist attacks. It was, hello, what are we doing here? And Jeffrey Stone, a University of Chicago law professor, that was stunning. That was the ball game. And over congressional intelligence official who asked not to be publicly identified. It flies in the face of everything that they have tossed at us. The conclusion of the panel's report were direct odds with public statements by President Barack Obama and the U.S. intelligence officials. The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they are being attacked and denounce the practice or lack of terror or patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country. And that was Hermann Goering. Yeah, I think he was a Nazi. In an interview, Air Force Lieutenant Michael Hayden, the NSA director, has said that the sheer volume and variety of today's communication means there's simply too much out there and it's too hard to understand. What we got was a blast of digital bytes, like a fire hydrant spraying you in the face, adds one former NSA technician with knowledge of the project. It was the classic needle in the haystack pursuit, except there was the haystack starts out large and grows by the seconds. The technician then explained NSA's computers simply were not equipped to sort through such data, flying at them so fast. Ray Corrigan, a senior lecturer in mathematics, computing, and technology, the Open University in the UK, has noted that mass surveillance is not the answer. In an article in the New Scientist, some of his comments. Brothers said, and Chief Kuchi and Amity Koulibaly, who murdered 17 people, were known to the French security services and considered a serious threat. France has blanket economic surveillance. It didn't avert what happened. The French authorities lost track of these extremists long enough for them to carry out their murderous acts. Surveillance of the entire population, the vast majority of whom are innocent, leads to the diversion of limited intelligence resources in pursuit of large numbers of false leads. Terrorists are comparatively rare, so finding one needle in a haystack problem, you don't make it easier by throwing more needleless on the stack. It is statistically impossible for total population surveillance to be an effective tool for catching terrorists. Most surveillance makes the job of the security services more difficult and the rest of us less secure. A terrorism expert has described a massive message interpretation by the U.S. government this way in counter-terrorist terms. It is a force. Basically, the NSA is the digital equivalent of the TSA, strip searching an 80-year-old Minnesota grandmother's rather than profiling and focusing on the likely terrorists. This says 1975, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death. This is 2006, this is Patriot Acts. Give up your liberty or we're all gonna die. That's about right. Such spying on ordinary citizens is not only against the American system, it also reduces liberty. It is a misapplication of resources. Money is being spent on liberty sacrifice for no real gain. The end result is that since the government decision making and policy about international terrorism is very hard it's very bad. The threat is increasing. What is worst of all, this fear-mongering may result in a major war in the Middle East. Mission creep may lead to further ground troops being deployed in the battle against the Islamic State. In spite of the protests to the contrary by Secretary of State John Kerry, some ground troops are already opening advisors to the Kurds. A similar mission creep has been noted in Canada. Some Canadian special forces have already engaged in fights with ISIS, and the conservative government wants to demonstrate its power and its ability to protect Canadian citizens at home in the face of the federal later this year. New legislation is being introduced shortly by the government, granting them these powers. Thanks to the wall-to-wall fear-mongering, a once was weary public in the U.S. now terrified. More than 60% of the people in the recent CNN poll now supports the airstrikes against ISIS. Two more polls, one from the Washington Post and the other from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal, have arrived at the same conclusion. Yeah, can you believe them though? Most shocking, 71% think that ISIS as terrorist sleeper cells in the U.S. against all evidence to the contrary. It will only be too easy for those who want to destroy ISIS military to further escalate the war. Stand in endless lines at the airport, accomplish nothing at enormous cost. That's the conclusion of Charles C. Munn, who put the TSA to the test with the help of one American top security experts. Since 9/11, the U.S. has spent more than $1.1 trillion on Homeland Security. To a large number of security analysts, this expenditure makes no sense. The vast cost is not worth the benefit. Not only has the actual threat from the terror been exaggerated, they say the great talk of the past 9/11 measures to contain it are little more than what some mock as security theater actions that accomplish nothing but are designed to make the government look like it is on the job. In fact, the continuing expenditure on security may actually have made the U.S. less safe. The only thing we have to fear is fear-mongering itself. Fear-mongering is dreadful, is deadly for all concerned. For us as citizens, it obviously makes us susceptible to the manipulation of the government that wants to justify war. Unfortunately, it is in the nuclear age, there can no longer be the justification for war. The just war theory is dead. Although I do not want to argue its demise in the past, I have done so most recently in it says Hellman's World blogspot, Immortality of War, and the war on terror is a specific the war on terror is a specious war. Since the war is undeclared, it is the enemy is hard to find. They are invisible until the act of terrorism elevates them in the world stage. If only for a brief period of time, put it is a convenient war, since it justifies the massive surveillance that was already been shown to the useless, but does permit governments to demonstrate their efforts to protect their citizenry. Unfortunately, civil rights are often the first victims of such massive surveillance. The legislation that would permit even more surveillance would come at a price of privacy and other freedoms. Are you willing to pay that price? For government's fearmonger contributes to the pitifully low evaluation of politicians on the trustworthiness scale. Politicians worldwide are perceived as interested only in gaining power. Once they do, they do not want to cede it. Yet by fearmongering, they are able to win power and form governments that hopefully will continue in power for a long time. Even for the terrorists themselves, fearmongering ultimately destroys their case. Fear may motivate people for a while, but eventually people no longer trust anymore. Then they lash out at everyone, especially those who have engineered that fear. Fearmongering involves battle between terrorists and governments. For the hearts and minds of ordinary people like you and me, we must not allow ourselves to be misled by either side. Instead, we must renounce fear and proclaim the truth about surveillance and the false security measures that the governments are perpetrating. Remembering this, the truth shall set us free from fear. And what can we do to lessen the grip on fear from terrorism? Click, guy turns TV off. Okay, and that's about it. I would say that in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, and I'll leave a link and you can go to it, read it, because part of my eye, one of my eyes was injured, so, and I have cataracts, so it's harder for me to read, but I'll leave the link so you can read it if you need to. It's very interesting, but this fear mongering is changing everybody's attitudes toward everything. And you know, the presidential election is coming up, and I will advise you not to vote for a socialist. They may sound good, but I'm telling you, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are two socialists, and they want everything to be free. Now somebody's got to pay for that freedom. To have free health care, free this, free that. You know, they think that the rich are going to pay, but we all know they're not going to pay. But I would like to leave this with you and say God bless. And thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. And just thank you.